meaning the US will probably be siding with Israel.
Why not Palestinians being recognized as a full member at the United Nations?
The world has, turned 180 when it comes to this particular war. Good day, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Amalina Kamal, your host for this latest round of Information Digest. Now today, the spotlight is on the dire escalating humanitarian catastrophe that grips the Gaza Strip and the reverberations around the world. Now, it has been 6 months since the Israeli forces started its ground offensive in Gaza. Now, they began their military actions on October 27 of 2023 last year as a means to defend itself as a counterattack of events on October 7, waging war against Hamas. Now, the death toll in Gaza since then has since reached over 33,000, but 8,000 are still unrecovered. Now, this death toll also includes civilians that are mostly women and children, unfortunately. Humanitarian workers were also among the casualties, and recently we want to just draw the attention to the attack on the WCK, which is the World Central Kitchen aid workers that took the lives of 3 British nationals, a Polish national, an Australian, a Palestinian, and a dual United States-Canadian citizen. Now, Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim has since also drew a lot of international attention when he criticized Western nations during a joint press conference with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Berlin on March 11th for their lack of action against Israel's atrocities in Gaza. Anwar questioned the humanity of the West and condemned their selective and ambivalent attitude towards the conflict. Now, this, of course, followed criticisms from other world leaders as well, who have been similarly critical of Israel's acts that have breached international laws. Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey are among the nations that have tried to contain the crisis, while all still have good relations with the Israeli state. Now, China and Russia, in the meantime, have been more critical of Israel's response to the attack. But before I get into the discussion further, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest, our very special guest that is here on set today, Palestinian Ambassador to Malaysia, His Excellency, Ambassador Walid Abu Ali. Welcome, His Excellency, to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm really happy that you had covered the 182 days since this Israeli state terrorism took over in Gaza.
I also want to introduce my other guest that's here next to me, Encik Azman Abdul Hamid, our opinions editor. Welcome, Encik Azman, to Beyond the Headlines, and for joining me here on set to interview the ambassador himself.
Okay, thank you. I'm really honored to be here to do it today and have a session with the ambassador. Hopefully, we'll get to the crux of the matter shortly.
Right.
Let me just start making it clear that the Israeli violation of international law, the Israeli genocide, the Israeli massacre is targeting all Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Al-Quds, and they continue to strike everywhere. I've said it, and I will say it, and I'll continue to say it, that there is no single square meter is safe or secure for Palestinians. All the geography, the 365 square kilometers in Gaza, has been struck by the Israeli army, by the Israeli forces.
Ambassador, it was interesting that you highlighted, the scale of the devastation, especially in the Gaza Strip, but we also understand that there have been heightened pressures in the West Bank as well. When we, question the Palestinian Authority stance, especially as the world is looking towards Gaza at this point, I just want to ask you this, a very personal question. How did you enjoy Ramadan here so far, especially knowing that, what has been happening back in your homeland is escalating way beyond what is expected?
Well, a very happy Ramadan Kareem to all Malaysians, to all Muslim Ummah. This is my 6th Ramadan in Malaysia. So I'm not new in Malaysia. I've been here. I arrived 2018. I witnessed 4 governments in Malaysia, 4 prime ministers. Ramadan is a special month for us, but unfortunately, people were focused so much. They were waiting to see a ceasefire during the holy month of Ramadan. But from my perspective, Ramadan means nothing to our enemies. Killing in Ramadan is the same killing before Ramadan and after Ramadan. Means nothing to them. Whether the people are starving in Gaza, day or night, they are continued to be targeted by the Israeli army. I was approached at the beginning of the holy month of Ramadan by a Malaysian local TV station. They were doing a program on Ramadan to see how other Muslim countries celebrate the month of Ramadan. And they want to come into my residence and they want to see what do we cook, how do we serve, how do we break the fast, and what's our cultural and tradition in Ramadan. And I've told them clearly, is it fair for me to open my residence and to cook and to show on the local TV that we are enjoying eating in Ramadan, where our 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza are starving? They have nothing to eat and nothing to drink. I don't think it's fair. Some of them were in tears, sympathizing with what I've said, and which is true, came out of my heart. Ramadan to us means a lot. The same as Malaysians enjoy and celebrate Ramadan, we in Palestine as well celebrate Ramadan. But unfortunately, international community witnessed the suffering of our people during the holy month of Ramadan, where they have no drinking water, where they have no food, where they have the very basic needs for health care, when the whole health system in Gaza collapsed and people were suffering. So this is the experience I have with the holy month of Ramadan.
Ambassador, one point I want to take from your earlier speech just now. The scale of slaughter in Gaza. People say that Israel say that Israel is going after Hamas. But given the evidence so far, would it be more correct that Israel is at war with civilians?
Well, this Israeli propaganda of trying to convince international community, especially the Western world, that they are countering Hamas, it's all a propaganda. If you look into the casualties, if you look into the damage which was created during the last 6 months, the message is clear to everybody. When the Israelis targeting hospitals, schools, UNRWA headquarters, UNRWA facilities, universities in Gaza, are all of these Hamas? They targeted 3 churches in Gaza. Are they Hamas? So this Israeli propaganda of trying to convince the international community that they are countering Hamas. History did not start on the 7th of October. History did not start just when the Israelis decided to invade Gaza. Our struggle has been going on for the last 7.5 decades. Hamas was created in 1987.
Yes.
But our struggle kept going since 1948. So they have to look into the root of the struggle. Don't just count that the history started on the 7th of October. No. There's a reason of what had happened. I'm not trying to justify or to make an excuse. Killing civilians is wrong. Attacking civilians is not acceptable. It's a crime. International community, I think, agreed that what the Israelis are doing by violating the international law, what had been discussed at The Hague on the ACC is clear. The Israeli crime continued for decades, and Palestinians have been victims of double standards because unfortunately international community and many of the international community representatives or governments looked through one eye. They always treated Palestinians unfairly. We as Palestinians wanted to be treated fairly once. We are being victims of the veto. Let me share with you, and I did share that with Malaysian officials. Since the veto was created within the United Nations, it has been used 85 times. Out of the 85 times, 81 times was against Palestine in favor of Israel. So Israelis believe that they are immune, with the veto. Unfortunately, whenever there is a resolution taken on favor of Palestine, immediately a veto is taken by the Americans against it, against Palestine and against the Palestinians.
I mean, we are expecting the UN membership vote in April for, Palestine to be part of the member state. What are your own personal hopes and wishes?
Why not? Why not Palestinians being recognized as a full member at the United Nations? When we witnessed, with the support of Malaysia and 3 other countries, when they sponsored a UN resolution 2334. It was Malaysia with New Zealand, Venezuela and Senegal, 4 countries who sponsored the UN resolutions 2334. Why can't OIC, Arab League, non-allied movements, international community sponsor a resolution now to recognize Palestine as a full member state at the United Nations? Don't the 14 million Palestinians deserve to be recognized and to recognize their rights, to be treated fairly, similar to any other nation around the globe? It's the time for the international community to be fair with Palestine and the Palestinians and to look to them through 2 eyes, not through 1 eye.
Given the what has happened so far since 1948, what you said just now, Ambassador, recognizing a state is one thing, but how do you realize that in the full meaning of the word, full independence, given the negotiations that has gone before?
We, with the pressure from the international community and being realistic, Palestinians decided to accept the 2-state solutions, where international community needs to recognize an independent Palestinian state according to UN resolutions 242 and 338 on 1967 borders, where an independent Palestinian state will be recognized with Al-Quds as its capital. This is the maximum that any Palestinian could accept. This will enable Palestinians to live side by side with Israel. This will give the chance for Palestinians and Israelis to put an end to this 7.5 decades struggle, where they can exercise peace, live in peace, enjoy peace, and put an end to the suffering.
But given the current situation, in Gaza specifically, do you still think the 2-state solution is relevant in today's time, seeing that how the world has, turned 180 when it comes to this particular war? We see what transpired on, the media, and also what transpired on social media are 2 different things. But a lot of the pro-Palestinian protests are looking at even doing away with this sort of peace treaty and going back to the history of when Palestinians were first flushed out of their homeland. I'm talking about the Nakba that happened in 1948.
We as Palestinians have made it clear even years before this catastrophe in Gaza that there is no Palestinian state in Gaza and there is no Palestinian state without Gaza. Gaza, West Bank and Jerusalem as a one unit. Separating Gaza from the West Bank or from Jerusalem, it's an Israeli propaganda that they are trying to convince international community that Palestinians can have their own state in Gaza. Gaza is a 365 square kilometers, as I said earlier. The maximum that any Palestinian, whether they are Hamas, whether they are Fatah, whether regardless of which political ID they have, Palestinians accepted the two-state solution in 1967 borders, according to UN resolutions 242 and 338, which includes Gaza, West Bank, and Jerusalem. The issue is not in Gaza. The issue is not Hamas. The issue is not the West Bank or Fatah. The issue is the Israeli occupation. Israeli occupied our territory in 1967, which is the rest of our historical Palestine. When Israel was created in 1948 and they took over 78% of historical Palestine, Palestinians struggled years before 1967. But with the pressure we've had from the international community, we accepted to have an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders, which includes Gaza, West Bank, and Al-Quds as the capital. Without that, no Palestinians will accept to put an end for the struggle. And the Middle East will continue to suffer. Israelis have tried peace treaty with Jordan, have tried peace treaty with Egypt for 5 decades. But if you go to Cairo, you go to Egypt and ask Egyptians, are you happy to be in a peace treaty with the Egyptians, with the Israelis? They will say no. If you go to Amman, Jordan, and you ask the Jordanians, they know the core issue, the cornerstone of instability in the Middle East is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Without Israelis recognizing the Palestinian rights in an independent Palestinian state, they will never enjoy peace and they will never live in peace.
When you said that, Ambassador, I mean, you look at the reaction from, because we should know that when it comes to decision-making time, what you call that, the closest ally of Israel, which we know who they are, will even today, the reports was the U.S. Or rather the president of the U.S. have asked Mr. Netanyahu to stop the killing, protect the civilians, and the latest said that Israel has opened temporarily three humanitarian corridors for it to go in.
Right.
Given that support from Western capitals, do you see them changing their minds about in this issue?
Let me be clear, just focusing on what are the priorities now at this moment.
Yes.
Priority number one is to stop the bleeding, to stop the war. The immediate decision has to be taken to stop this war, this genocide immediately. And you know as much as I know and everybody know that this only can happen with a serious pressure from the American administration, from those supporters to Israel to convince this terrorist government in Israel that they have to stop their genocide against Palestine. So that's a top priority number one. Second priority is to facilitate a humanitarian corridor, whether it's through Rafah crossing point, whether it's through Erez crossing point, regardless of how the people in Gaza are starving, are thirsty, and they have no health facilities. So a humanitarian corridor is a must, is a need immediately to facilitate, to help 2.3 million Palestinians who have been under siege for the last 16 years. They have been suffering since 2007. And international community were witnessing their suffering for 16 years. It became worse since 7th of October. And people are paying a very expensive bill, since the Israelis have absolutely attacked every single Palestinians in Gaza. Whether they are civilians, they claim that they are targeting Hamas. The Israeli rocket do not differentiate between Hamas, Fatah, civilians in Gaza. Because if you look into the statistics I provided you, among the 33,000, there are 12,000 children below 12 years old. There are almost 8,000 women. There are elderly people. There are innocent civilian Palestinians. Majority of the victims so far, among those who were killed or those who were injured, 73% are civilians. So that's where the Israeli is responsible. The Israeli government is responsible of this genocide and this massacre in Gaza.
To our audience, just to echo His Excellency Walid's point here. Well, Doctors Without Borders yesterday on April 4th actually did make a press statement and actually called that Gaza is facing population collapse as it deals with severe malnutrition and continuous systematic destruction of the healthcare system. Now, the Secretary General, Christopher Lockyer, actually said that, patients who came in have wounds that are specifically, focused on explosive weapons, and there have been cases, where they receive patients with gunshot wounds, but are specifically from drones. So, and these are children. Right now, we are seeing constant, dehumanization of the Palestinians. Even health workers or aid workers are also not, I can't escape from this.
It's not just health workers. What about journalists? How many journalists were targeted and killed? How many health workers? How many the Red Crescent staff members? How many ambulances they destroyed? How many hospitals? In Gaza we used to have 36 hospitals. 32 hospitals were targeted and destroyed. Among them, the Indonesian hospital, and so many other hospitals, Al-Shifa Hospital, and so many others. So at the moment, there are 4 hospitals only working with the minimum, because all I can say, the health system in Gaza collapsed. Those health staff in Gaza are working with its minimum, with the very basic capabilities, because they are not facilitating, they are not allowing health aids to be facilitated to Gaza to help these hospitals. Just imagine, it was reported to me, 56 women had cesarean sections with no anesthesia. Just imagine, how can you carry out a cesarean section with no anesthesia? Just imagine, neonatal nurseries were operating with no oxygen. You mentioned malnutrition, and you mentioned, absolutely there are children who are suffering of starvation in Gaza, even up until today. With all countries who had contributed to send humanitarian aids to Gaza, they parachuted, and they managed to facilitate some humanitarian aids, which has never been enough for those who are in Gaza.
Right. Follow-up question. A permanent ceasefire or a sustained ceasefire is what's needed in terms of allowing the mobility for, humanitarian efforts to assess civilians who are injured. But how do we go beyond that? How would the Palestinian Authority actually coordinate with Arab and international parties to completely stop the aggression that is actually happening in Gaza and the ripple effects that we are seeing today?
We knocked every single door around the globe, not just, Arab countries. We asked all international community just to be brave enough to show their support on the ground. To condemn what the Israelis are doing is not enough. To keep just in theory, show your support to Palestine is not enough. International community, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, all those who believe in human rights, all those who believe in democracy, they must act together and take practically some decisions to be implemented on the ground to show that they are helping Palestinians. Palestinians, it's no more, we are in no need for just to condemn what the Israelis are doing, because Benjamin Netanyahu and his government know very well the maximum that Arab countries or Muslim countries or those human rights believers, that they will say they will condemn what the Israelis are doing. But if you look and see the protesting and demonstrations all around the globe, even in America, even in Washington, even in London, the people who are showing their support with Palestine, it's great, and we are grateful to what they are doing. But we are in need of some practical measures on the ground to help those who are suffering, those who are under fire in Gaza. How can we help them with some practical measures on the ground?
Ambassador, in that respect, the protesting in so many capitals, do you feel that perhaps it's also symbolized that not all Israeli propaganda is effective? People are now looking at the issue in a different way.
The opinion of the people in most capitals are changing. With the social media now, you can't hide. We all know out of history, Israelis used to control the very strong media agencies in the past. But those days, propagandas can't be hidden. At the moment, things are clear. What's happening at Shifa Hospital has been published all over the globe. Everybody witnessed what the Israelis did in Shifa Hospital. Everybody witnessed what the Israelis are doing in north of Gaza, in the city of Gaza, in Khan Yunis, in Deir al-Balah, everywhere in Gaza. Everybody's witnessing what the settlers in the West Bank are doing against Palestinians. Everybody's witnessing the settlers when they invade the Masjid al-Aqsa and they invade Al-Quds. So it's clear, the message is clear. There are some governments, some regimes who are still under influence of the Israeli and the Jewish lobbies around the globe. They are still affected by the pressure manipulated on them by the Israelis and the Israeli government, by Zionists around the globe. Yes, but the people, I think, when you see the biggest demonstration broke through in Chicago, in Washington, in Paris, in London, in most of the Western capitals, in Australia, in Canada. The alliance of Israel is clear. It's not a secret. Those countries who support Israel is clear. But I think the people realizing at the moment that what Benjamin Netanyahu and his government are doing is wrong, and they have to stop.
But leading up to that, there will, in the past, there have been a lot of pressure towards the Palestinian authorities, where some has been very critical towards the leadership and even blaming them for not even navigating, the peace treaty or talks when it comes to, Palestinian statehood very well. What do you have to say with that?
All I can say, listen to me, we have to be realistic and we have to be clear. All Palestinians, whether you are in Gaza or you are in the West Bank or you are within the Palestinian Authority, with the Palestinian Authority or against the Palestinian Authority, we are all under the Israeli occupation and we are limited to what we can do. On the political level, our leadership in Ramallah tried its maximum with its contact with the international community from day one to stop this crazy a war against our people in Gaza. But what can we do? If the whole Ummah is unable to stop the Israelis, if the whole Muslim Ummah are unable to stop what the Israelis are doing, are you expecting the Palestinian Authority alone to fight the Israelis and stop them? Yes, in the political level, we went to The Hague, we went to General Assembly, we went to Arab League, we went to OIC. We tried our maximum, we tried our best, you know. But unfortunately, the Israeli government, they believe that they are immune with the support they are getting from the United States of America and from their alliance around the globe.
In that sense, when you talk about practical steps, Ambassador, the move by South Africa to take this case to ICJ, I think, do you, I mean, it should be symbolized that the world has actually acknowledged that perhaps the occupation cannot last much longer. But that is the crux of the matter. How can you make a move to stop the occupation?
The initiative South Africa was an excellent initiative, and it did actually give a chance for all those who believe in human rights to support South Africa with their initiative. And it is a step towards the right direction to show the support for Palestine and Palestinians. But to be fair, let me highlight and emphasize, in Malaysia, a group of lawyers, advocates, had the initiative since 2017. And they put a case against Israel at The Hague. My AQSA sponsored that before South Africa. I raised the issue in the Malaysian parliament when I met with the speaker. I raised the issue with so many Malaysian officials. I always wanted to see Malaysia sponsor the initiative of South Africa because Malaysia is capable, and they did sponsor, as I mentioned earlier, the 2334 resolutions. And Malaysia, with its influence locally, regionally, and internationally, can play a strong role in sponsoring a resolution, whether it's ICJ or ICC, whether it's at the General Assembly or Security Council. They can do something. But all in all, as I mentioned earlier, the top priority at the moment is to stop the Israeli aggression on Gaza, to stop the war, to stop the genocide in Gaza. That's only can be done with a pressure from the American administration, from President Biden. I know how much it is sensitive at the moment, since next November is going through the election, and we know how the lobbies work on America, and we know that the Israeli security, as they always say, is a top priority on the agenda of the American foreign policy. We know that. But at the same time, we know that Americans can put pressure on Israel to stop the bleeding in Gaza immediately.
Given that you mentioned November, Ambassador, the general perception is, of course, whoever's occupy the White House, more or less will not have that much different policy when it comes to treating this issue. Meaning, the U.S. will probably be siding with Israel. The only question is how much. Are you, shall we say, pessimistic on that level?
Not really, but I am actually. I do hope Americans realize that their interests in the Middle East, it's not only in Israel. The American interests in the Arab and Muslim countries is as important as the interest in Israel. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we know how strong the Jewish lobby in America and how much influence they have on the election and on the administration even after the election. But if Americans wants to lead the world, as they always pretend, they have to be fair, and they, if they promote themselves as democracy defenders and human rights defenders, they have to see the suffering of Palestinians. Palestinians have been suffering for 7.5 decades, and they deserve to be treated fairly, and they deserve to have their own democratic state. They deserve to have their own freedom to enjoy and exercise peace in their own land.
On that score, Ambassador, there is now a new administration, PA, Palestinian Authority, under Mr. Muhammad Mustafa. Yeah. What's the immediate, shall we say, priorities for the new guy when it comes to this?
Well, the new government with Prime Minister Muhammad Mustafa just started a week ago. The first meeting was last Monday, and if you look into the letter he submitted to our President Mahmoud Abbas, where he prioritized the work plan of this government, of course Gaza is number one on his agenda. The war in Gaza, how to put an end to the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, how to facilitate humanitarian aids to Palestinians in Gaza, how to rebuild Gaza, how to look into all Palestinian territories under the Israeli occupation. How can we get rid of the Israeli occupation? How can we stop the settlers' attacks against Palestinians in the West Bank? How can we stop the two extremist ministers in Israel, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who are invading continuously Al-Aqsa Mosque? How can we give Palestinians a hope of an optimistic future where they can enjoy to live in peace in our Palestinian territories in Gaza, West Bank, and in Al-Quds? Right. That's the priority for our new government.
Okay. I mean, since we are talking about the new administration, the Palestinian administration here, so we have about 23 ministerial portfolios, including the representation from Gaza. Now, this government actually signifies unity and determination, but I just want to also understand this in particular. What measures is the new government considering to improve when it comes to governance, especially in addressing the needs of Palestinians, not just in the occupied territories, but all over the globe, right? I mean, basically, their right to a homeland.
Palestine have a sole, legitimate representation. International community recognize that. PLO is the sole representative of Palestinians in Palestine and in diaspora. I have with me here, and I always carry it with me. We as Palestinians are in Palestine almost 7.5 million, and outside Palestine in diaspora we have about 7 million. In Palestine, we have 1.5 million Palestinians in what's called Israel. They hold the Israeli passports. They hold the Israeli citizenship because they remained in their homeland and they were forced to take the Israeli citizenship. So they are Israelis. But in Israel, they have been discriminated and they are treated as second-class citizens in their own country, in their own territory. The second category, 2.5 million Palestinians in Gaza, who have been under siege for 16 years, as I mentioned, and they have been suffering of the Israeli siege for almost 16 years, and international community failed to enable the very basic humanitarian needs that they might need in Gaza. So they have been suffering, and they were able just to go in and out of Gaza through the Rafah crossing point, which is open temporarily and closed most of the time. The third category, about 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, are suffering the Israeli occupation, Israeli checkpoints, the Israeli settlers, the Israeli harassment, the Israeli killing, the Israeli arresting. So the three groups: one, suffering of discrimination; second, suffering of the Israeli siege; and third, suffering of the Israeli occupation. And almost half of our nation, about 7 million Palestinians in diaspora, neighboring countries in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, in Egypt, even in Malaysia, we do have Palestinian refugees.
Right.
And they all are struggling for the right of return. If a Jew in Argentina, for example, is eligible to go and live in Israel and enjoy to live freely in Israel, why Palestinians are not eligible? 7 million Palestinians are not eligible to go back to Palestine and enjoy and live in Palestine. So the right of return is a must for all those Palestinian refugees, all those Palestinians who are living outside Palestine. Without summarizing what I've said, without putting an end to the Palestinian suffering, without recognizing the Palestinian rights in an independent Palestinian state, which will enable any Palestinians around the globe to go and live freely in an independent Palestinian state, Middle East will continue to suffer. Middle East will continue to be unbalanced and unstable.
Right. I mean, since we're already talking about the Palestinian diaspora all over the world here, right? We also want to touch on, the targeting of high-profile Palestinians, especially when Israel has previously mentioned that, they've been targeting high-value Palestinians, especially in Malaysia. We have, personalities like Dr. Fahd, and also the botched kidnapping that happened not too long ago, I believe. Basically, the threat towards their security and safety, they are still being persecuted even outside of Palestine.
Israeli ideology, the Israeli strategy, the Israeli mechanisms always practice this, not just in Malaysia, all around. We as Palestinians being victims of the Israeli intelligence attacks from Europe to Africa, Asia, everywhere. Even after what had happened here in Kuala Lumpur by arresting this Israeli agent,
Right.
who holds a French passport, according to the media. What I want to make it clear that you rarely will find an Israeli holding just one passport. The Israelis are used to use so many passports. And since Malaysia is an open destination for tourism, somebody will arrive at KLIA with a French passport, he is welcome to Malaysia. How they will know that he is an Israeli? Even those who were involved in killing of Dr. Fadi al-Batsh in 2018, they killed Fadi al-Batsh using different passports, not an Israeli passport. So it is not a new practice of the Israeli security agents. They can travel easily anywhere they want because they use a second passport. But even after what had happened in Kuala Lumpur, they just attacked Damascus and they targeted Iranians in Damascus. What the Israelis are doing, somebody somewhere has to ask this Israeli government to respect international law, to respect the humanity of nations around the globe. They don't have to feel that they are free to do whatever they want to do, anywhere they want, anytime they want. The Israelis must understand that what they are doing will never maintain or provide peace for Israel.
Okay. clearly, even asking the question whether or not Palestinian security is at stake globally, that's an understatement of sorts. Like, but how should we navigate this whole of topic when it comes to Palestinian perseverance here?
Listen, I was interviewed and I've asked our Palestinian community in Malaysia. We trust the Malaysians, security measures. We trust the Malaysian security agencies. I don't want our Palestinian people in Malaysia to panic. I don't want our Palestinian people in Malaysia to be under pressure because of what had happened. Just relax. We got used to it. We trust this country. We trust, the capabilities of Malaysians. We are safe and we are secured. This is my message to my Palestinian community, to our Palestinian students, to our Palestinian refugees. Just don't worry, relax, take care. Don't do anything which will put you under questioning. Respect law and order of the country. Do whatever needed, whatever you asked by the Malaysian security agencies.
Right.
Let's talk a bit about the media, Ambassador. Do you detect any differences? Media here, because of the country's pro-Palestine, but overall, do you feel that perhaps some media has not really played their role very effectively?
I personally, media is media, and it's a difference between one agency to another agency, one journalist to another journalist. But all in all, as a Palestinian ambassador, I say Malaysian media is in favor of Palestine, supportive to Palestine, and they always show their support and solidarity to the Palestinian cause. I can't complain against any journalist or against any media agency in Malaysia that they are against Palestine and Palestinians. No. If Malaysians have any differences, the Palestinian cause unify all Malaysians.
I do have a question in terms of the Palestine Investment Fund. Ambassador, maybe could you give our audience a little bit of a breakdown on what goes behind this? And in particular, Prime Minister Mustafa's background in economic advisory, for those who are not necessarily aware of it yet.
Well, as a Palestinian Authority, we depend so much on the donors' contributions. Donors' countries. Since Palestinian Authority was created, we depend a lot on what people contribute to keep the Palestinian Authority going. Of course, one of the strategic pressures has been manipulated on us since the 7th of October is stop funding UNRWA. We depend a lot on the contribution of the international community, how much they contribute to keep the Palestinian Authority going. The pressure we've had, number one, when the Israelis decided to hold our tax money, and the Smotrich, the finance minister of Israel, who has been, very aggressive against the Palestinian Authority when he decided to hold our tax money, which is still held by the Israeli government, put us on a financial crisis as a Palestinian Authority. Our employees, whether they are in Gaza or in the West Bank, their salaries have been paid for the last 6 months with between 50 to 60% only. We're trying to manage with what we have. We're trying to manage with what we can do. But lately, some countries had changed their mind in terms of supporting UNRWA. UNRWA was created for the Palestinian refugees for two main reasons: healthcare and education. When international community accepted the Israeli propaganda that 12 members of UNRWA were involved with Hamas, and they decided to stop funding UNRWA, I think it was not a fair decision by those countries who decided, to stop funding UNRWA, because if there are 12 or regardless the number of individuals, you need to investigate, you need to take action against them, but do not take an action against the whole UNRWA, where 14 million Palestinians will be suffering because of such decision, especially those days when the people in Gaza in the refugee camps, the people in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in the West Bank are suffering because of lack of funding of UNRWA in terms of healthcare and education.
I also want to expand into, Prime Minister Mustafa's role. I mean, he holds the foreign minister position as well.
Finance.
Finance as well, yes, too. So are there any anticipated changes in the Palestinian foreign policy and in the fiscal kind of like outlook?
Dr. Mohammed Mustafa is an executive member of the executive committee, which is the highest leader committee of PLO. He's an economist, and he used to be in charge of the Palestinian Investment Fund until he became the prime minister. A week ago, he started his job as a prime minister for Palestine. He had the first cabinet meeting. It's a technocrat government in Palestine. This government has no political ID, except that it is a Palestinian government which will look after all Palestinians regardless of their political ID. So it's not a Hamas government, it's not a Fatah government, it's a Palestinian government represent all Palestinians, with the cabinet members who represent both geography of Gaza, West Bank, and Al-Quds as the capital. So this government hopefully will look after Palestinians internally and externally in Palestine and in diaspora. Back to your question about the Prime Minister holding the Foreign Ministry and the Finance Ministry, I think lately, as he said, and I get it directly from him, there will be nominating a foreign minister and a finance minister. But at the moment, he is acting
right.
as a foreign minister and as a finance minister, as well as a prime minister. Right. But there will be, up until today even, as an ambassador, there is absolutely no change on our day-to-day running as diplomats or
right.
as embassies.
Right. I want to also understand your views on on Biden's administration's with sudden change of tone with regards to Israel's conduct, especially after the strike against World Central Kitchen. Do you see this as just a smokescreen? Do you see this as just a distraction?
Frankly talking to you, and let me share with you, with all my sympathy with those who were killed during this attack against the World Kitchen, staff members. And I noticed the reaction of the American administration and many other governments and countries. The killing of these 7 individuals meant a lot to the international community, but the 33,000 Palestinians were killed, were accepted. Killing is killing, whether it's Canadians, Americans, Palestinians, or any other nationality. Why international community focus so much on the killing of these 7 members of a humanitarian aid providers? As I said, I do sympathize with them, and I'm against that. Don't misunderstand and misinterpret what I say. But what is most important for President Biden and his administration and all those who believe in countering from the humanitarian side of it,
right,
what the Israelis are doing, just to be brave enough and condemn what the Israelis are doing against Palestinians. To Palestinians in Malaysia, as I said, relax, don't panic. We trust and we accept what Malaysians are doing. We are safe and we are secured. My message to Malaysians, thank you very much for all what you are doing. We highly appreciate the efforts of the Prime Minister, the government of Malaysia, and the people of Malaysia, NGOs of Malaysia, for their ongoing support and solidarity in terms of maintaining a process of helping the people in Gaza as a priority. In terms of our political bilateral relationship with Malaysia, I always said that we are looking for a Malaysian role regionally and internationally. Locally, all Malaysians are united to support Palestine, but Malaysia can use its influence to convince those who are questioning the support of Palestine in the region and internationally. So thank you, Malaysia, for what you are doing to Palestine. We highly appreciate. I wish you all a Hari Raya. I wish you all a happy Eid, and I'm sure the day will come where we will celebrate Eid in Al-Aqsa Mosque in Al-Quds when we have an independent Palestinian state.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There you go to our audience. His Excellency Walid Abu Ali, thank you so much for being on Beyond the Headlines. And Sheikh Azman, thank you so much for being here as well. And to our audience, if you like this particular episode, don't forget to comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. If you haven't already, follow us on X, Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. Comment and engage with us. Now, my name is Amalina Kamal, and unless we are made of wood and our hearts are cast in stone, it is impossible to not be shocked by the spectacle of mayhem being perpetrated towards Palestinians. On behalf of the production, I would like to wish our audience a very special Hari Raya ahead. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.